October last year in Manchester, another woman was attacked. This time the victim died and the ripper was blamed. She was 21-year-old Jean Jordan. She'd been attacked in similar circumstances to the other victims, and like most of them, she'd been a prostitute.
Jean Jordan's body was found here in South Manchester 9 days after she'd disappeared. The body was naked, and her clothes were scattered around it. It was very obvious to any passer-by. But the curious thing was that no passer-by had seen the body during the previous 9 days.
For example, a path runs a few yards away. It's a busy route to some nearby allotments. But nobody using it had seen the body. So the police deduced that it must have lain somewhere else until shortly before it was discovered. They searched for the place. They found it had been under a nearby hedge. So they could only conclude that after murdering Jean Jordan, the killer had pushed her body under the hedge. And then, when it had not been discovered, he'd been reckless enough to return to the scene of the crime and move the body out into the open. The police searched for someone who might have seen him on either visit. However, as so often in the past, they drew a blank.
What is happening, YouTube? You are watching JME-TV, and today we are in an allotment in South Manchester, and you're probably wondering why we're in this allotment, this dirt road. As you can see, there's nothing here. The allotments are there, which I can't get in. And today we're going to be talking about a harrowing story of a young woman who was murdered brutally and taken by one of Britain's most infamous serial killers, Peter Sutcliffe, also known as the Yorkshire Ripper. Sutcliffe terrorised the north of England during the 1970s and early 1980s, and Jean was one of his victims, and her story is one of tragedy, cruelty, and the grim reality of a life cut short. Now, what's even scarier about this is that she was murdered just behind these gates in that allotment and left there. And she is buried, if you walk with me, her final resting place is in the cemetery down this path. So guys, let's get right into it. Jean Jordan was born in 1953 in Scotland, and she grew up in a working class family and later moved to Manchester. She moved to Manchester to, build a new life for herself, and that is exactly what she was doing. By the mid-1970s, Jean was living in the Moss Side area of Manchester, and unfortunately life had not been that kind to her. She was struggling to make ends meet, and Jean actually ended up turning to sex work as a means of a survival. Jean was known to her friends and neighbours as a friendly, warm-hearted person. Despite the challenges she faced, she was actually a mother of two, and she was trying to provide for her children under difficult circumstances. And unfortunately, a lot of stories happen where young mums who struggle to make ends meet end up turning to sex work. And unfortunately, this is the only option Jean had. So guys, as you can see down there, that's where the allotment is, all the way at the bottom down there. And on the evening of October 1st, 1977, Jean was out working on Princess Road, which is this road here, as a sex worker. And Princess Parkway, it's known as Princess Parkway now, back in the day, was rife for prostitution, and Yeah, so this is where they used to solicit on this road, and this is where Jean Jordan was when she encountered Peter Sutcliffe. At the time, Sutcliffe was already on a murderous spree. He was targeting vulnerable women across the region. He had a particular hatred for sex workers, and he later claimed this was due to his belief that they were unclean and responsible for STIs such as VD. Now guys, we are going to walk over from here where we are now over to where Jean Jordan's actually buried, which is where my fingers have just pointed there. So we'll head round there now, guys. So guys, as you can see, Princess Parkway is just there, and that is where there was probably a secluded spot where Sutcliffe approached Jean and offered her money in exchange for sex. The two drove to a secluded area, which would have been at the back over there in Southern Cemetery, for privacy. Now this is a ginormous cemetery that has been here since 1879, so you can imagine even in the 70s how many graves this place had. And once he arrived at the allotment, which was over there, Sutcliffe launched his brutal attack on Jean. He struck her repeatedly with a hammer, and that was a weapon he often used in his murders. Jean, although she was stunned and injured from the attack, she did actually try to resist. But Sutcliffe was relentless in what he was doing. After bludgeoning her repeatedly, he used the knife to further mutilate her body, ensuring that there was no way of survival. After the murder, Sutcliffe realised that he had given Jean a brand new £5 note as payment, a significant mistake that could potentially link him to the crime. He panicked knowing that this note could be traced back to him. He searched Jean's body but was unable to find the money in the dark, so he left the scene intending to return later. 8 days later, on October the 9th, 1977, Sutcliffe returned to the site where he had left Jean's body. He was determined to find the £5 note and remove pretty much any evidence that might connect him with the crime. When he arrived, he discovered that Jean's body had not yet been found. He then attempted to hide her body more effectively by dragging it into a more concealed spot within the cemetery and further mutilating it to obscure any clues. However, he was unable to find the £5 note. It wasn't until October 10th, 1977 that Jean's body was discovered by Bruce Jones, a local actor who would later become known for his role as Les Battersby in the popular British sitcom Coronation Street. At the time, Bruce was not yet famous and was simply walking through the Southern Cemetery when he made the gruesome discovery. Bruce immediately contacted the police, who launched a full investigation into the murder. Jean's body was found in a terrible state, with severe injuries that indicated a violent and sustained attack. Despite the brutality of the crime, police were able to recover the £5 note from Jean's belongings, which would later prove to be a crucial piece of evidence in the hunt for her killer. The police quickly realised that the £5 note could be traced. It had been newly issued by a local bank and was part of a specific batch of notes that had been distributed to a few companies in the area. The investigation into the origin of the note led to an extensive inquiry that involved questioning hundreds of men who received similar notes as part of their wages. Although Sutcliffe was among those questioned, he managed to avoid suspicion at the time by providing an alibi that placed him elsewhere. The investigation into Jean's murder continued, but with no clear suspect in sight, it became just one of many unsolved cases attributed to the mysterious Yorkshire Ripper. It wasn't until January 1981, nearly 4 years after Jean Jordan's murder, that Peter Sutcliffe was finally caught. His arrest came after he was found with a prostitute in a car that had stolen licence plates. During questioning, police discovered tools in his possession that matched those used in the Yorkshire Ripper murders. Sutcliffe eventually confessed to killing 13 women, including Jean Jordan. Jean's murder had a profound impact on her family and friends in the local community. Her children were left without a mother, and the horror of her death left an inedible mark on all who knew her. For the people of Manchester and the wider region, Jean's murder was a stark reminder of the dangers posed by the Yorkshire Ripper. So guys, as you've seen, we were over there where she was murdered. Just behind those trees was the allotment. Well, she met him on Princess Parkway. They went over to the allotment. He murdered her there, brutally. And then she was buried here. So guys, as we walk to Jean Jordan's grave, very simple. Jean Bernadette Jordan, 1956 to 1977, mother to Alan and James. So guys, that was the story of Jean Jordan and the Yorkshire Ripper. Don't forget to like, share, follow, subscribe, hit that bell for more videos that come up.